The flames consumed the village like a hungry beast, swallowing homes and dreams in their endless appetite for destruction. Princess Sion pressed her wounded body against the cold stone wall of a burning barn, her immortal blood dripping from the silver wounds that covered her arms and chest. The vampire hunters had been waiting for her, and she had walked straight into their trap like a fool. She was over 300 years old, the beloved daughter of the vampire king. Yet tonight she would die in a place that smelled of hay and horse manure. How embarrassing, she thought, as her vision began to blur and her ancient strength faded with every drop of blood she lost. The blessed silver burned through her veins like liquid fire, and she could feel her body shutting down piece by piece. Vampire hunters knew their craft well, coating their blades with holy water and silver dust, a combination that could bring even the oldest of her kind to their knees. She heard footsteps approaching and closed her eyes, accepting her fate. At least she would die with dignity, refusing to beg or crawl before the humans who hunted her kind. But the footsteps stopped, and instead of the sharp pain of a blade, she felt gentle hands lifting her head. "You are hurt badly," a young male voice said. Filled with concern rather than hatred, Sion forced her eyes open and saw a human man kneeling beside her. He was young, perhaps 20 summers old, with kind eyes and dirt-stained hands that spoke of hard work in the fields. A farmer, she realized, not a hunter. "I know what you are," he said softly. "I saw your eyes glow red when you fought those men outside the village." She waited for the fear, the disgust, the religious fury that humans always showed when they discovered her nature. She waited for him to call for the hunters or reach for a weapon instead. He tore a strip from his own shirt and pressed it against her deepest wound. "Why?" She managed to whisper, her voice weak and broken. "Because you are dying," he answered simply, as if that explained everything, as if saving a vampire princess was the most natural thing in the world. "I am a monster in your eyes. Your priests teach you to destroy creatures like me." The young man shook his head and smiled gently. "My mother taught me that every creature deserves compassion. She said that kindness costs nothing but means everything." He looked at her wounds with worried eyes. "The silver is killing you slowly. You need blood to heal, do you not?" Sion turned her face away in shame. Yes, she needed blood, but she would not take it from this innocent farmer who showed her mercy when no one else would. "Take mine," he said. She stared at him in disbelief. "You do not understand what you offer. If I drink from you, I might not be able to stop." "I trust you," he replied, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no tremor of fear. He pulled back his sleeve and offered his wrist to her. His pulse was steady and strong, the blood flowing through his veins, calling to her like music. "Please," he urged. "The hunters will return soon. You must heal enough to escape." Against every instinct that told her this was wrong, Sion took his wrist and brought it to her lips. She bit down as gently as she could, and his warm blood flowed into her mouth like liquid life itself. She drank only what she needed, fighting against the hunger that demanded more. When she pulled away, the young farmer was pale but still conscious, still looking at her with those impossibly kind eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling her wounds begin to close as his blood worked its magic inside her. He helped her to her feet, just as shouts echoed from outside the barn. The hunters were coming back, and this time they brought torches. "There's a root cellar beneath the floor in the corner," the farmer said quickly. "Hide there until sunrise. They will not search after dawn. What about you?" He smiled that gentle smile again. "I will lead them away. They saw me running toward the barn, so they will believe I was stealing during the chaos. They will hurt you. Better me than you," he said. And before she could argue, he pressed something soft into her hands. His coat, worn and patched but warm, "To keep you safe from the cold," he explained, then ran toward the barn door. "Wait!" She called out, "What is your name?" But he was already gone, his footsteps disappearing into the night as he shouted to draw the hunters away from her hiding. Placy Zioyan crawled into the root cellar and pulled the wooden cover over herself, clutching his coat against her chest. His scent surrounded her: earth, sweat, wood smoke, and something uniquely his. Something she would never forget as long as she lived. She waited in the darkness, listening to the chaos above. She heard the hunters shouting, heard their horses galloping through the burning village. And then she heard a sound that shattered her ancient heart, a scream. Distant but unmistakable. The young farmer crying out in pain. She tried to move, tried to climb out of her hiding place, but her body was still too weak. The silver damage would take hours to fully heal, and by then it would be too late. She pressed her face into his coat and wept silent tears. Something she had not done in over 2 centuries when dawn finally came and the hunters departed. Zioyan emerged from the cellar and searched the ruins of the village. She found bodies everywhere, humans caught in the crossfire between hunters and their prey. Innocent people who simply wanted to live their simple lives. And near the old well, at the edge of the village, she found his coat's matching scarf. Soaked in blood, she searched for 3 more nights, but she never found his body. The hunters must have taken it, a trophy of their successful hunt. Another monster slain in their holy war, but he was not the monster, she thought bitterly. The monsters were the ones who killed a kind young man for showing mercy to a stranger. Zioyan kept his coat. She carried it with her through decades, then centuries, preserving it with ancient magic so that it would never decay. His scent remained trapped in the fabric, a permanent reminder of the human who gave his life for hers. Her father, the Vampire King, told her to forget the dead human and focus on her duties. Her brother, Crown Prince Taeyeon, tried to comfort her with the promise of time healing all wounds, but 400 years passed. And Zioyan never forgot his face, his voice, or his impossible kindness. She never even learned his name. Now she sat in a modern coffee shop in Seoul, South Korea, surrounded by humans who had no idea that an immortal princess watched them from behind dark sunglasses. The world had changed so much since that burning village. Yet some things remained the same. Humans still lived, loved, and died in the blink of an immortal eye. And Zioyan still carried the coat of a nameless farmer who saved her life for no reason other than basic human kindness. The coffee shop door opened, bringing a rush of cold winter air and the smell of the city, and then she caught a different scent. One that stopped her dead in her tracks. It was impossible. It could not be real. Yet there it was, unmistakable after 4 centuries of carrying it against her heart earth. Sweat, wood smoke, and something uniquely his. Zioyan turned her head slowly, her ancient heart pounding for the first time in hundreds of years. A young man stood at the counter, ordering coffee. He wore the uniform of a paramedic, his face tired but kind. His eyes warm despite the exhaustion that hung on his shoulders. He looked nothing like the farmer from her memories. Yet he smelled exactly the same. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but she did not notice. She could not look away from the impossible man standing just 20 feet away from her. After 400 years of searching, fate had finally answered her prayers. Park Ji-sung ordered his usual Americano and rubbed his tired eyes. The night shift at Seoul Central Hospital had been brutal, with 3 car accidents and a building fire keeping him running until dawn. He was 28 years old, a paramedic who loved his job despite the exhaustion it brought. Saving lives gave him purpose, made him feel like his existence mattered in a world that often seemed cold and uncaring. As he waited for his coffee, he felt a strange sensation at the back of his neck, like someone was watching him. He turned around and noticed a woman sitting alone at a corner table, staring at him with wide eyes. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal, with pale skin and dark hair that fell past her shoulders. But it was her expression that caught his attention. She looked at him like she had seen a ghost. Their eyes met, and Jizong felt something shift inside his chest, a feeling he could not name or explain. It was as if a door had opened somewhere deep in his memory, revealing a room he never knew existed. The barista called his name, and the moment broke. When he looked back at the corner table, the strange woman was gone, leaving only a shattered coffee cup on the floor. Jixiang shook his head and blamed his exhaustion. He was seeing things, imagining connections that did not exist, but that night, he dreamed of fire. In the dream, he was running through a burning village, his lungs filled with smoke and his heart pounding with desperate purpose. He was carrying someone, a woman with red eyes and silver wounds on her arms, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would die to keep her safe. He woke up gasping, his pillow wet with tears. He did not remember crying. These dreams had haunted him since childhood, fragments of a life that was not his own. Doctors called them vivid nightmares, a product of his overactive imagination. But Jizong knew they felt too real to be simple dreams. He kept a sketchbook on his bedside table, and in the early morning light, he drew the woman from his dreams, a beautiful face with ancient eyes and lips, stained with blood. He had drawn her hundreds of times over the years, never knowing who she was or why she lived inside his head across the city, in a penthouse apartment above a nightclub called Midnight Court. Sion paced back and forth like a caged animal. It cannot be him, she whispered to herself. He died 400 years ago. I heard him scream. I found his blood, but his scent did not lie. Vampire senses were perfect, and she had carried his scent against her heart for centuries. The man in the coffee shop smelled exactly like the farmer who saved her life. She called her contacts and gathered information. By sunset, she knew everything about Park Jiseong. Was an orphan, abandoned as a baby and raised in the foster system. He had no family, no connections to his past, as if he had appeared in this world from nowhere. He became a paramedic at 22, and his supervisors described him as almost reckless in his dedication to saving lives. He ran into burning buildings, climbed into wrecked cars, and threw himself into danger without hesitation. Everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them, he had said in an interview after receiving an award for bravery. Sion read those words and felt tears streaming down her face. It was something Minho would have said, something the kind farmer would have believed with all his heart. She began watching Jizong from afar, following him through his daily routine like a shadow. She watched him save an elderly man who collapsed on the street, watched him comfort a crying child whose mother had been injured in an accident, watched him give his lunch to a homeless veteran who had not eaten in days. Every act of kindness was like a knife in her heart, proof that the soul she had lost had somehow found its way back to her, but she could not approach him. What would she say? Hello, I am a vampire princess, and you saved my life 400 years ago before dying at the hands of hunters. Now you have been reborn, and I have been waiting for you ever since. He would think she was insane, and perhaps she was after 2 weeks of watching from the shadows. Sion decided to arrange an accidental meeting. She positioned herself outside the coffee shop at the exact time. Jizong usually arrived after his night shift. When he walked through the door, she pretended to be leaving. They collided gently, and his hand reached out to steady hers. The moment he touched her arm, Jizong felt that strange sensation again, like electricity running through his veins. He looked into her eyes and felt like he was falling into something vast and ancient. I am sorry, Sion said, a voice carefully controlled despite the storm raging inside her. No, it was my fault, Jisong replied. I was not watching where I was going. He should have let go of her arm, but he did not. Something kept his hand in place, some instinct deeper than thought. You look familiar, he said slowly. Have we met before? Perhaps in another life, she answered, and she meant it more literally than he could know. They sat together at a small table, and Sion asked him questions about his work. She already knew the answers, but she wanted to hear him speak, wanted to compare his voice to the one that lived in her memories. Why did you become a paramedic? She asked. Jiazong was quiet for a moment, his coffee growing cold in his hands. I have these dreams, he admitted. Dreams where I am saving someone important, someone who matters more than my own life. I know it sounds crazy, but those dreams made me want to help people, made me believe that saving others is what I was born to do. He looked embarrassed. I have never told anyone that before. I do not know why I'm telling you. Sion reached across the table and touched his hand. Her skin was cold, but he did not flinch. Everyone deserves someone willing to carry them out of the fire, she said softly. Jiazong stared at her with wide eyes. How did you know that phrase? I have never said it out loud, but it is something I think about all the time, like a motto I did not choose but cannot forget. Sion felt tears building behind her eyes, but she forced them back. This was not the time to break down, not when she had finally found him again. It is a good motto, she managed to say. It speaks of a kind heart. They talked for hours, until the coffee shop filled with afternoon customers, and the staff began giving them impatient looks. Jiazong could not explain why he felt so comfortable with this strange woman, why he wanted to tell her things he had never told anyone when they finally parted ways. He asked for her name. Sion, she replied. And yours? Park Jiazong. She repeated his name like a prayer, a word she would carry with her forever as she walked away. Jiazong noticed something strange. A tear fell from her cheek and landed on the pavement. Like a drop of silver rain, he wanted to call out to her, to ask why she was crying, but she had already disappeared into the crowd that night. Jiazong dreamed of fire again. But this time, he saw the woman clearly. Red eyes, silver wounds, and a face that looked exactly like Seo Yan woke up with a single word on his lips. A name that felt ancient and familiar, though he had never heard it before. Sion, he whispered into the darkness. I think I have been looking for you my whole life. Across the city in her penthouse above the nightclub. Sion held the 400-year-old coat against her chest and wept. He had returned. Her farmer had found his way back to her, but he did not remember who he was. And she did not know how to tell him the truth without destroying everything. Fate had given her a second chance. But fate was cruel, and second chances always came with a price. The weeks that followed were the happiest Sion had experienced in 4 centuries. She and Jiazong met often, sharing meals he thought she was eating and conversations that felt like coming home. He told her about his lonely childhood in foster homes, his dreams of fire and sacrifice, his deep need to save others, even at the cost of his own safety. She listened to every word and fell in love with him all over again, but guilt gnawed at her heart like a hungry rat. Jiazong deserved to know the truth about who she was and who he had been. Yet every time she tried to tell him, the words died in her throat. How could she burden him with a past life he did not remember? How could she tell him that he had died for her, that his kindness had cost him everything? Her brother, Crown Prince Taeyang, noticed the change in her and demanded answers. You have found him, Taeyang said, his ancient eyes narrowing as he watched her pace across her penthouse. The human who saved you all those centuries ago, his soul has returned, Sion admitted, but he does not remember anything. He is a new person now, with a new life and a new name. Then leave him to that new life, Taeyang advised. The Vampire Council will never approve of your attachment to a human, and our father's protection can only extend so far. Father is dead, Taeyang. He has been dead for 200 years, but his wishes remain. He wanted you to be safe, to focus on your duties as princess. He never wanted you to waste your immoral heart on creatures that fade like morning mist. Sion turned to face her brother, and her eyes glowed red with ancient power. Minho gave his life for me. He chose to die so that I could live. Do you think I can simply forget that? Do you think 400 years have made his sacrifice meaningless?" Taeyeon sighed and looked away. "I think you are chasing a ghost, sister. The man you love died in that burning village. This Jusong is not him, no matter how similar his scent may be." But Seoyeon knew he was wrong. Jisong was Minho, reborn and returned. She felt it in her bones every time he smiled, every time he spoke, every time his kind eyes looked at her like she was something precious. Meanwhile, Jisung's dreams were growing stronger and more vivid. He saw himself in strange clothes, working in fields, living in a village that no longer existed. And always there was a woman with red eyes and silver wounds. A woman he would die to protect. He began researching reincarnation, reading about past life memories and soul connections. He knew it sounded insane, but nothing else explained the dreams or the instant connection he felt with Seo-yeon. Wanted to tell her about his theories, but he was afraid she would think he was crazy. Normal people did not believe in past lives and reborn souls. One night, Seo-yeon invited him to her nightclub, Midnight Court. She wanted him to see her world, to understand that she was not entirely human. The club was elegant and mysterious, filled with beautiful people who moved with unnatural grace. Jisong felt out of place in his simple jacket and worn shoes, but Seo-yeon took his hand and led him through the crowd like he was a king. "These are my people," she said softly, "my community. We have been here for a very long time." Before Jisong could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted near the back entrance. Shouting, crashing sounds, and then a scream that cut through the music like a blade. Seo-yeon's expression changed instantly. Her soft smile vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Stay here," she commanded, but Jisong was already moving toward the sound. His paramedic training kicked in without thought. Someone was hurt, someone needed help, and he could not stand by while people suffered. He pushed through the crowd and found a nightmare. A creature stood over a young woman. Its face twisted into something inhuman. Fangs gleamed in the dim light, and blood dripped from its mouth. As it turned to face the intruder, Jisong should have run. Any sane person would have fled from the monster before them. Instead, he grabbed a broken chair leg and stepped between the creature and its victim. "Get away from her," he said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "A brave little human. How delightful. I will enjoy draining you slowly." It lunged forward with impossible speed. And Jisong knew he was going to die, but Seo-yeon was faster. She appeared between them like a shadow given form, her eyes blazing red and her fangs extended. She caught the rogue vampire by the throat and slammed it against the wall with enough force to crack the concrete. "You dare hunt in my territory?" Her voice was ice and thunder, ancient power wrapped in cold fury. The rogue vampire struggled and begged, but Seo-yeon showed no mercy. With a single motion, she ended its existence, and it crumbled to dust before Jisong's eyes. Then she turned to face him, and he saw her clearly for the first time. Red eyes, fangs, pale skin, immortal and beautiful and terrifying. "Seo-yeon?" His voice cracked on her name. She waited for him to run, to scream, to look at her with the hatred and disgust that humans always showed her kind. Instead, Jisong stared at her with tears forming in his eyes and whispered, "Red eyes. Just like my dreams." She took a step toward him, and he did not retreat. She reached out to touch his face, and he leaned into her cold hand like it was the warmest thing he had ever felt. "You are not afraid," she said, wonder and confusion mixing in her voice. "I have dreamed of those eyes for my entire life," he replied. "How can I fear something that has always felt like home?" They left the club and walked to her penthouse. Seo-yeon knew she could not hide the truth any longer. She showed him the coat, the 400-year-old fabric that still carried his scent. She told him about the burning village, about the kind farmer who saved her life. About the scream she heard as he led the hunters away. Jizong listened in silence, his hands trembling as he held the ancient coat. His name, he asked softly. What was his name? I never learned it. He saved me, and then he was gone, before I could ask, before I could thank him properly. Jizong pressed the coat against his face and inhaled deeply. The scent was old and faded, but it felt familiar in a way that made his chest ache. And then the memories came. They hit him like a wave. Fragments of another life crashing through his mind, working in fields under a summer sun. A mother with kind eyes who taught him about compassion, flames and fear and desperate love, carrying a wounded woman through smoke and chaos. Offering his blood to save her life, he remembered the hunters, remembered running to draw them away. Remembered the pain of their blades and the darkness that followed. He remembered dying with her name on his lips. Even though he never knew it, Jizong collapsed to his knees, and Sion caught him before he hit the floor. She held him as centuries of lost memories flooded through his reborn soul. When he finally opened his eyes, they were filled with tears that had waited 400 years to fall. I remember the fire, he whispered, his voice breaking. I remember you. I remember choosing to save you because you were beautiful and hurt, and no one deserved to die alone in that horrible place. Sion wept against his chest. 400 years of grief and longing finally released. She had found him again, and he remembered. And nothing else mattered in this moment. I never stopped looking for you, she said. I never stopped hoping. Jizong held her tightly and made a silent promise to whatever force had brought them back together. He would not leave her again. Not in this life or any other. Fate had given them a second chance, and he would not waste it. The days that followed were strange and wonderful. Jizong carried two sets of memories now. His life as Park Jizong, the orphan paramedic who saved lives in modern Seoul and scattered fragments of Minho, the farmer who had died for love in a burning village 4 centuries ago. Sometimes the memories blurred together, and he would forget which life he was living. Other times, he felt perfectly clear. A soul that had simply taken 2 journeys instead of 1. Sion helped him through the difficult moments. She was patient and gentle, understanding that he needed time to reconcile his past with his present. You do not have to be Minho, she told him one night as they watched the city lights from her penthouse balcony. You are Jizong now, and that is enough. I do not expect you to become someone you are not. But I am him, Jizong replied. And I am also me. Both lives are real. Both choices matter. Minho chose to save you, and Jizong chooses to stay with you. They are the same choice, just made across centuries. Sion leaned against him and felt something she had not experienced in 400 years. Peace, but peace, like all precious things, did not last. The Vampire Council summoned Sion to appear before them, and she knew this meeting would not be pleasant. The council chamber was located beneath an ancient temple in the mountains outside Seoul. 12 elders sat in a half-circle, their faces as old as the stones that surrounded them. Lord Han Seok, the oldest and most traditional of the council members, spoke first. Princess Sion, we have received reports that you have formed an attachment to a human male. We are told you spend your nights with this creature, that you have revealed our nature to him, that you treat him as an equal rather than the food source he truly is. Sion stood tall before the council, her voice calm but firm. The human you speak of saved my life 400 years ago. He died protecting me from hunters. His soul has returned, and I will not abandon him. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Some elders looked curious, others disgusted. A human who died centuries ago? Another elder scoffed. Souls do not return, princess. This is fantasy, wishful thinking. You have become attached to a mortal pet, and it is beneath your station. I know what I know, Sion replied. I carried his scent for 400 years. This man is the same soul, reborn. I will stake my honor on that truth. Lord Hanseok leaned forward, his ancient eyes cold with disapproval. Your honor is not in question. Your judgment is. Even if this human was once your savior, he is no longer that man. He is a fragile mortal who will die in a handful of decades, leaving you alone once more. Then I will cherish the decades we have. You will turn him, Hanseok commanded. Make him one of us or release him from your life. A vampire princess cannot be seen doting on a human like a lovesick child. I will not turn him against his will, Sion said firmly, and he has chosen to remain human. I respect that choice. The council erupted in angry voices. Turning a human was considered an honor, a gift of eternal life. For a human to refuse such a gift was an insult to vampire kindreds. Taeyun stepped forward from the shadows where he had been watching. If I may address the council. The elders fell silent. Taeyun was the crown prince, and his words carried weight. Our father, the late king, left instructions before his death. He decreed that if the human who saved Princess Sion was ever found, that human should be honored and protected. Our father understood the value of the sacrifice made for his daughter. The old king is dead. Lord Hanseok spat. His decrees died with him. His decrees are law until the council formally overturns them, Taeyun replied smoothly. And I do not see a majority here willing to insult the memory of our beloved king. Do you, Lord Hanseok? The chamber fell into tense silence. Hanseok glared at Taeyun with barely concealed hatred, but he knew the prince was right. Challenging the late king's wishes would be politically dangerous. Very well, Hanseok said finally. The human will be tolerated. But he is your responsibility, princess. If he causes any trouble, if he reveals our existence to the human world, you will both face the consequences. Sion bowed formally and left the chamber. But she knew this was not over. Hanseok's eyes had promised revenge, and ancient vampires did not make empty promises. 3 weeks later, the attack Kamajizeong was walking home after a late shift when 3 figures emerged from the shadows. They moved with inhuman speed, surrounding him before he could even register the danger. The princess is not here to save you. Little human, one of them hissed. Lord Hanseok sends his regards. Jisung's paramedic training had not prepared him for fighting vampires. But Minho's memories stirred inside him. He remembered being brave, remembered standing against darkness even when he had no hope of winning. He grabbed a metal pipe from a nearby construction site and swung it at the nearest vampire. The creature laughed and caught the pipe easily, but Jisung had expected that. He released the pipe and ducked under the vampire's arm, running toward the street where people were passing by. If he could reach the crowd, perhaps the vampires would hesitate. They could not attack him in front of dozens of witnesses without risking exposure, but the vampires were faster. One of them appeared in front of him, blocking his escape. Another grabbed him from behind, cold fingers digging into his shoulders. Lord Hanseok was right. The lead vampire said, "You are brave for a human. What a waste to kill you. You would have made a fine servant. I will never serve anyone who threatens the people I love," Jisung replied. Struggling against the iron grip that held him, the vampire raised a clawed hand, ready to strike the killing blow. Jisung closed his eyes and thought of Sion, of the centuries she had waited for him, of the promise he had made to never leave her again. He had failed once. He would not fail again with strength he did not know he possessed. Jisung broke free of the vampire's grip and threw himself backward, crashing through a shop window and landing among shattered glass and scattered merchandise. The alarm triggered, loud and piercing. People on the street stopped to look. Witnesses were gathering. The vampires hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. They could kill Jisung, but doing so in front of humans would violate their most sacred law, and then Sion arrived. She descended from the rooftops like an avenging angel, her eyes blazing red and her face twisted with fury. She tore through the 3 vampires without mercy, without hesitation, without a single moment of doubt. When it was over, 3 piles of ash scattered in the winter wind, and Sion stood over Jizong with blood on her hands and tears on her cheeks. "I almost lost you again," she whispered. "I felt your fear across the city, and I almost did not reach you in time." Jizong reached up and touched her face, wiping away her tears. "You saved me. Again, you saved me. I think we are getting better at this." She helped him to his feet and held him close. His heart was pounding, his body shaking with the aftermath of terror, but he was alive. The council would hear about this. Hanseok's assassins were dead, but there would be consequences. Ancient vampires did not forgive or forget, but for this moment, standing in the cold soul night with the woman he had loved across centuries, Jisong felt only gratitude. "Twice now," he said softly. "You have saved me twice. I think we are finally even." Sioing laughed through her tears and kissed him gently. "We will never be even," she replied, "and I will spend eternity keeping it that way." Tomorrow would bring new dangers and new battles. Lord Hanseok would not give up so easily, and the vampire world was not kind to those who defied its traditions. But tonight, they were together, and that was enough. 6 months had passed as tonight Sioin destroyed Lord Hanseok's assassins. The Vampire Council had been forced to acknowledge her power and her determination. Attacking her chosen companion meant declaring war on the princess herself. And few were willing to take that risk. Hanseok had disappeared into the shadows, nursing his hatred and waiting for another opportunity. But for now, the immediate threat had passed. Jan continued his work as a paramedic, running into burning buildings and pulling people from wrecked cars. He refused to abandon his human life, even knowing that supernatural dangers lurked around every corner. "You could stay in the penthouse," Sioin suggested one morning. "I can hire guards to protect you. You do not have to risk yourself every day." Jizong shook his head and smiled. Minho was a farmer who helped his neighbors. Jizong is a paramedic who helps strangers. Both of us are the same in this. We cannot stop trying to save people, even when it puts us in danger. That is what worries me, Sioin admitted, but she respected his choice. She had loved him for his kindness, and she would not ask him to be less kind simply because it frightened. Here on the anniversary of their first meeting in the coffee shop, Jizong surprised her with a plane ticket. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You will see." They flew to Eastern Europe, to a small country that had changed its name and borders many times over the centuries. Jizong had spent months researching, tracing old maps and historical records, following threads of information that most people would have dismissed as impossible to find. The village where Minho had lived no longer existed. Fire and time had erased it from the earth. But the land remained, rolling hills covered with grass and wildflowers. Peaceful and beautiful in the summer sun, Jizong led Seiyan through the fields to a small stone monument that stood beneath an ancient oak tree. "I found records," he explained, "in archives and church documents. A farmer named Minho died here 400 years ago, killed by hunters who claimed he was protecting a demon." Sioin felt her throat tighten. She had searched for information about him for centuries, but had never found anything. She had assumed all records were destroyed. The villagers cursed his name. Jisong continued, but the church documents tell a different story. A noblewoman arrived the night after his death and paid for a proper burial. She built this monument herself, carrying the stones with her own hands. Sioin touched the weathered surface of the monument. She remembered that night, remembered her grief and rage, remembered wanting to destroy the entire village in revenge. Instead, she had honored him. She had given him a resting place and a marker so that his sacrifice would not be forgotten. "I did not know anyone had recorded what I did," she whispered. "You loved him," Jisong said softly, "and you honored that love." That is not something that disappears, even after 400 years. They stood together in silence. Two souls separated by death and reunited by fate. Standing at the place where their story had begun finally, Jizong took her hands and looked into her eyes. I have been thinking about the future, he said. Ziyuan felt fear grip her heart. Was he going to leave? Had the reality of loving a vampire finally become too much for him? I know you have not asked me to become like you, Jisong continued. I'm grateful for that. You have given me the choice, allowed me to decide my own fate. I will always give you that choice. Sioyan replied, I will never force immortality upon you. I know. And that is why I love you. But I have made my decision. He paused, and Sioyan held her breath. I will live my human life, he said. I will continue saving people, continue being Jizong for as long as this body allows. And when my time comes, I will accept whatever happens next. Sioyan felt tears forming in her eyes. She had known this would be his choice, but hearing it still hurt. But, Jizong added, squeezing her hands gently, if I get another chance, if my soul returns again, I will find you. I always will. Minho found you in a burning village, and Jizong found you in a coffee shop. Wherever you are, whatever name you carry, my soul will recognize yours. How can you be so certain? She asked, because I have already proven it twice. Death could not keep us apart before, and it will not keep us apart again. Sioyan pulled him close and held him tightly. She did not know if souls could truly return again and again, if fate was that kind or that cruel. But she chose to believe in his promise. She had waited 400 years once. She would wait again if she had to. They returned to Seoul and lived their lives together. Jizong aged while Sioyan remained unchanged, but their love deepened with every passing year. They argued and laughed and cried and healed. Two imperfect beings building something beautiful together. Jiziong never regretted his choice to remain human. There was something precious about mortality, about knowing that every moment mattered because moments were limited. He lived fully and loved deeply, giving everything he had to the people around him. And when he grew old, when his body began to fail and his time drew near, Sion was beside him. No regrets? She asked, holding his weathered hand in her cold fingers. None, he replied, his voice weak but certain. Every day with you was worth a century of immortal emptiness. I will miss you. Not for long, he promised. I will find you again. Just keep waiting. He closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully. And Sion wept for the second time in 400 years. She kept his coat, just as she had kept the first one. She added it to her collection of precious memories. 2 pieces of fabric that held the scent of the man she loved. The years passed, then decades. Sion continued her duties as princess, managing her territory and protecting her people. But part of her heart was always listening, always waiting. And then, 73 years after Jiseng's death, on a spring morning in a park near her nightclub, a small child approached her. He was perhaps 5 years old, with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. He held a white flower in his tiny hand, and he walked straight toward her, as if drawn by an invisible thread. This is for you, he said. Offering her the flower, Seon knelt down to his level, her heart pounding. She looked into his eyes and saw something ancient looking back at her, something that recognized her even though this child could not possibly understand why. Why did you give me this flower? She asked gently. The boy tilted his head, thinking hard. Because you looked sad, he answered, and my dreams told me that you have been sad for a very long time. Sioin felt tears streaming down her face. Your dreams? I dream about fire sometimes, the boy said, and the lady with red eyes. The dreams make me want to help people. Is that weird? No, Sioin whispered. That is not weird at all. The boy's mother called from across the park, and he turned to run back to her. But before he left, he looked at Sioyan one more time. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," she promised. "When you are ready, you will find me." "You always do," the boy smiled. A smile that crossed centuries and lifetimes, and then he was gone. Running through the spring grass toward his mother, Sioyan held the white flower against her chest and laughed through her tears. He had kept his promise, just as she had kept hers. Some debts cannot be repaid in a single lifetime, and some souls refused to stop trying. She would wait. She would always wait. And when he was ready, they would begin again, because true love does not end with death. It simply finds another way forward, and their story, written across centuries and souls, would never truly end.